I think you print this press release off and you can put it in the Louvre, just frame it.
Oh.
Because look, I mean, what you're really seeing here, this is a stock that's gonna be green tomorrow. I mean, what they're putting up in terms of Hopper, in terms of overall growth, it's exactly what the Bulls want, and he'll continue to underpromise. I mean, next quarter, that could be a 4 in front of it in terms of ultimately revenue. This is just the beginning of the AI revolution, $4 trillion on its way.
Sure, and long term, you may be very well right, but are you not concerned about this plus or minus 2% that the company is reporting on revenue, simply because the market wants the company to beat and beat well every quarter?
Yeah, if you looked up sandbag special in the dictionary, you'd see this guidance. And I think Street's gonna look through it. I think this is a stock that probably will be up even on the conference call, because if you look at everything that they did here in terms on the data center, you could Hopper, we could be talking 5, 7, 8 billion per quarter. That was just ultimately many thought it could just be a few billion. So as this all plays out and you start to look at numbers over the next, call it 12 to 18 months, the godfather of AI, Jensen, NVIDIA, continue to be in that Mount Rushmore, and it just shows it's starting with NVIDIA. Now second, third, fourth derivatives playing out. That's why it's 9:30, 10 p.m. in this AI party that goes to 4 a.m.
Oof. Has the time changed at all since you came out with that?
It was 9 p.m.
Okay.
And now we're 9:30,
okay,
10
got
p.m.
it, got it. So my other question to you, since there are so many commentary, there's so much comments on Blackwell, how production will ramp up into fiscal 2026, the production shipments will begin in the fourth quarter of fiscal year 2025, which is the current quarter. Does NVIDIA break out Blackwell revenue, or is this something that you and investors always need to reverse engineer out of the data center numbers?
Yeah, essentially investors reverse engineer it, but if you look in terms of some of the wording there, basically saying any of those heating issues, don't worry about it. And I think that's going to give more and more comfort. This is going to ram significantly in terms of that, and I think that continues to be the story, because we've talked about from our Asia trip, demand to supply 15 to 1. And there's only one game in town, and he's wearing a black leather jacket. His name's Jensen. And I think that's why this continues to be still in the early days of what I believe we'll be talking about 4 trillion on.
You mentioned the overheating issues, and these are Blackwell, overheating, which might require redesign of the servers housing the chips. And the companies that make the servers are Dell, Hewlett Packard Enterprise, Supermicro. Do they end up carrying the cost of having to redesign everything?
Yeah, but ultimately I think that is something that's really noise. And from all the checks we do, that's why, look, when you're at the top of the mountain, you're always gonna have people trying to take shots at you. But if you look at how NVIDIA is playing out here, there's really no production issues as this all ramp. And that's why when you hear from Jensen today, I think investors are going to realize this AI revolution, now it's about second, third, fourth derivatives. You look what's going to play out across software, across the rest of semis, across cybersecurity. If you're a tech bull, this, combined with obviously the last few weeks in terms of Trump, Musk, and everything we see, this is what I think is really going to be a setup to a Santa Claus rally.
So we are seeing NVIDIA saying that Blackwell is going to exceed supply for several quarters, but that there are some supply constraints. Now, you do those channel checks, Dan. Tell us the truth. Where have you seen those bottlenecks or those potential places where supply will be constrained?
Everyone's waiting in line. They're at the velvet ropes, and there's only one party, and that's really, in terms of NVIDIA and Jensen, I think the issue there is that you want those next chips. That's what everyone, that's the new oil or gold.
Yeah, but that's the customer side. I'm talking about from the supply side, from NVIDIA being able to actually deliver these.
It's ramping, it's ramping. Look, like any new production, any new chip, it's gonna take time to ramp. But I would say if you thought relative to 3 months ago, ahead of expectations. So you sit there right now, if Jensen's flying the plane, you're in 3A watching Netflix feeling pretty good.
In terms of pricing power, can Jensen Huang raise the prices of those Blackwell chips even more than what he has already? I mean, what are you expecting on that front? And should people look for maybe increased prices for those chips?
They definitely can, but right now, it's all about market share. They're just going to continue to go further and further out. And even when you look at what the hyperscalers are spending, you have now $300-400 billion of CapEx, AI CapEx, just in your sites. Then you think about sovereigns, look at private, look at everything else. It just shows we are in an unparalleled, once in a 40-year tech trend, and that's why that Mount Rushmore is Jensen along with Nadella, Carp and others.
You talked earlier about how there's a velvet rope and a lot of people waiting to buy these chips. The hyperscalers are at the front of the line, but if you bring in sovereign buyers into the mix, where do they stand? Do they get to jump the line?
Sovereign's in the middle of the line. They're saying, oh, my name's in the list. They're like, look, you can't get in front of these people in the front, and that's big tech. Sovereign's still in the middle of the line. They will get in, and then behind them, it's the rest of the Fortune 2000. That's why we're going to be talking about next year or two, 4 trillion, 5 trillion. This tech bull market is still in the early days.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think the question is obviously how sustainable is this ongoing AI compute demand? How sustainable it is going forward? Yes, the stock's up 189% year to date. We're expecting about $33 billion worth of revenue. We probably will surpass that somewhat. I think in the next quarter, however, when you really start to see Blackwell come through, that will be the bang out quarter, which is the quarter that we're working through right now, which would potentially see $38 billion worth of revenue. So I continue to like this story. We hear from the hyperscalers and all the CapEx spend that's going in this space that obviously NVIDIA continues to capture. There's not a lot of competition for them currently. So I continue to like the stock, and I think that maybe you're not buying it right here, but there will be opportunities that present themselves. We've seen how this stock has traded over the last few quarters.
Josh, what are you waiting for ahead of NVIDIA as an owner of this name as well?
There's a report out there that the implied swing for NVIDIA up or down is expected to be about 8.5%. That's in line with the average swing that we've seen over the last 12 quarters, but the company is much bigger than it's ever been. It's $3.5 trillion. So a swing of that magnitude is almost $300 billion, which is more than almost every publicly traded company's market cap. So we are basically looking at a situation where the biggest, most loved, most celebrated, most well-regarded stock in the entire market is coming out with an earnings report that yet again they guided higher going into. Analysts are now looking for $33.28 billion, which was a guide up from last quarter, 70 cents in earnings per share. That equates to 84% year-over-year revenue growth and 89% earnings per share growth. So my comments here would be, yes, we all hope for the best, but let's all be very honest with each other. A company at $33 billion in revenue, being able to do 84% growth on that and then telling you they're going to do it again next time is very low. I think the tightrope that NVIDIA now has to walk is to remain optimistic about the future, but not continue to push out those expectations and give people the impression that year-over-year sales doubling for a $3 trillion company is in any way realistic as far as expectations. I think they get it. I think there's a way to do that. I think there's a way to give guidance, sound optimistic, but not keep painting yourself into a corner of people looking for doubles every time you report. We'll see if they can pull it off. That's what I'm watching for.
Yeah, so it could be some magical verbiage. Stephanie, you actually prefer Broadcom to NVIDIA.
Well, I mean, I like NVIDIA, but I feel like I missed it. But I have done well with Broadcom, just given its diversified revenue mix. You do get the number 2 AI player. It's going to be a $12 billion business for the company. You do, what I really like, though, is they bought VMware, and that's going to be a $4 billion per quarter revenue run rate for them. So the diversification I like very much. And also the valuation is a little bit cheaper, but it's up a lot. It's up 47% this year to date, and so it's had a nice run. I think with NVIDIA, if it is down, I don't know about you guys, but I think it's going to get bought. First and foremost, it's 7% of the S&P 500 in terms of its weight. It's almost 9% of the NASDAQ. So if you're betting against it, you have to offset it, which is what I'm doing with Broadcom. It's a very big position to offset. However, this is a company that has a whole new product cycle story that hasn't even begun next year. And we all know that the hyperscalers are spending tons and tons of money, about 41% rise this year alone and a 17% rise next year. And so that's real tailwinds for the company. So I'm sad I don't own it, but I'm happy I own Broadcom. And I think Lam Research is also an AI play that hasn't had the respect. And I do think that will play catch up in 2025.
There doesn't have to be just one winner, of course. It's good to talk about several.
That's right. Well, I have a ton of industrials that also are benefiting from AI too. So I definitely have AI exposure.
Yeah, absolutely.